Dr. Craig Hansen. I'm delighted to have Joe Houghton with us, an author, educator, writer, aficionado in AI. So welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Craig. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Hey, why don't you share with us your background?
Yeah, well, AI is something that I got into when ChatGPT first came out, November 22, wasn't it now? I suppose I'm a bit of a nerd, ex-computer programmer, went through the kind of multinationals that way. But now last 20 years, I've been in education, and the AI thing just kind of sparked all my tick boxes. It's technology, it's new, it's computers and all the rest of it. So I got into writing the books really to learn about the technology. And it's interesting because I was watching one of your recent guests, and he was talking about his process of taking notes.
Dr. Stan.
And that's right, yeah, squirreling away all the different notes on all different, and I do almost an identical process, but using Notion, the AI tool. When I've got enough notes together, a book comes out kind of, and normally fairly quickly.
Wow, that's great. And so when you're using Notion, are you populating it with just your written notes, or do you have your sources in there as well? Is it the whole thing?
Everything. What I tend to do is I set up a Notion page for each topic of interest floating around in my head. Yeah. And those might be talks that I've got that I'm going to be doing. They might be courses that I know I'm going to be running over the next year or so, and I've got maybe different sessions and stuff like that. So I have a Notion page for each of those. And then as I read anything, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's on Flipboard, whether that's on Facebook or wherever, because you tend to read the stuff that you're interested in. And that populates your feeds because of all the algorithms and stuff. So when I'm reading an article and I think, oh yeah, that'll do for that talk, or that'll do for that session or whatever, and this is one of the really good things about Notion as a tool, is it's got the share option. So when you have Notion installed, no matter whether it's on your computer or your iPad or your phone, you just share whatever you're reading, and Notion pops up in the share menu. And then you choose the page in Notion that you want to share that link to, and it just appends it to the bottom of the page. So then when I come back to that page, ready to do some writing, I've got this whole set of links that I've thrown into it, that I can then go and start to assemble into something a bit more meaningful.
Very clever. In your history, are you from schools, from high schools, from academia? Where's your
No,
history
I'm
in
not,
education?
not an academic. No, I kind of describe myself as a businessman who teaches, I suppose. I mean, 20 years in the multinationals doing kind of IT, and then IT to business, and digital transformation projects and stuff. Ended up in GE, working as a global manager for them. But then the first two children came along. This is kind of 21 years ago now. Moved to Ireland, did an MBA, and then switched into this portfolio career that I'm now doing, where I do some university work, I do some writing, I do some consulting and training, and then some bit of charity work, and two small children at home, 12 and 13. Yeah, busy.
Yeah. And I really like the title of your book, The Accessibility Gap. And so what brought that on? What captured your attention about that?
That's interesting. I was in one of the online conferences about 2 years ago, and I ran into an Australian academic, and we just got chatting in the chat. Elizabeth Hitches is her name, and she's doing a lot of work around inclusion, out of Macquarie University, I think it is, in Australia. And we kind of stayed in touch, and we've done a couple of seminars together, and we've actually just started a new podcast, which we'll be releasing fairly soon, in this whole area of accessibility and UDL and AI. So about a year ago, I kind of just started to think, I've been a teacher at university now for 20 years, and I don't really know anything about accessibility. And it was one of those scary moments where you realize that you should know more about a topic than you do. And I was reading this stuff on AI, on accessibility, and thinking, like, how many of my students have gone through my classes and I haven't been sensitized to their challenges and stuff. So I thought, well, for me, the best way of learning a subject is to start writing about it. So I started squirreling away stuff, and the book came out about 6 months later. So yeah, so it was a way of me getting up to speed, I suppose, on accessibility and tying that into AI and UDL.
Right. I was speaking with my mother on the weekend, and she has quite a long history working in universities and as a
Uh,
career counselor and helping students prepare for work and industry partnerships. And she was describing a student who had some accessibility issues, some challenges, personal challenges, barriers to learning. And there was a resistance at that time. So we're talking 15, 20 years ago, but there was a
yeah,
resistance at that time for the lecturers and the tutors to modify their assessments in a way that would make it more accessible for that student to have
yeah.
success, because just getting up in the morning and moving and getting focused was a challenge for the students. But there was
Yeah.
that resistance. Do you find that in higher education now, academic staff are more willing to think about the different learning needs, the diversity of their students?
I think they're more willing. I think there's still a gap. I think if you look at UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and the way that that's grown globally over the
Mm,
last years or so, I think that's starting to kind of narrow the gap. I think it's raising the consciousness of
right.
accessibility and this need to design for a wider spectrum of learners. Because I think, as we all know, there's no such thing as the typical learner. And yet that's what we've designed for so many years, isn't it? The
Mm,
class is aimed at that typical learner. And we kind of assume that everybody is that learner, and they're not. So I
mm,
think educators are becoming more aware of the diversity of most learning cohorts and starting to put in place, rather than putting in place accommodations post design,
right.
they're designing in, and that's the idea, isn't it? That you design your materials in so that you don't then have to make accommodations afterwards,
Mm,
because people can come to your learning environment and be part of it, because you've already thought about most of those issues that they're going to potentially face.
for
So
educators who, sorry.
representation and stuff like that, the need for giving students choice, the need for
Mm,
allowing them to express themselves in different ways. I mean, there's that lovely old cartoon. I don't know whether you ever saw it, but there's a teacher sitting at a desk faced by a number of animals. And there's a monkey, and there's an elephant, and there's a bird or whatever, and there's a fish in a goldfish bowl. And if we measure people on how fast they can climb the tree,
right.
maybe the monkey wins or maybe the bird wins. Fish is never going to win.
Mm,
Yeah. If we measure on how fast people can swim, maybe the fish wins. But the elephant isn't going to get far, are they? So we tend to measure just in one way, and we assume that everybody's got to produce things in one way,
mm,
and they haven't. And I think that's a mindset change for a lot of educators, that we can measure people in different ways against kind of a common standard.
right. For those that are starting their journey with AI and also thinking about accessibility and designing in for neurodiverse students,
Yeah.
students with different learning needs, what are two or three things that an educator could do leveraging AI?
Leveraging AI. There's a very good tool that came out about a year ago, and it's based around the Poe AI. I don't know whether you've come across Poe,
Mm,
Poe,
mm,
AI. And Poe allows you to create chatbots yourself.
okay.
And an educator in Germany called Beth Stark, and if you haven't interviewed her yet, she would make a great
Mm,
interviewee. And she teamed up with a guy called Jeremy Rostin, who works in Panama, and they created this chatbot called Ludia, Ludia, and it's basically it's been trained on UDL. So you can go into the Ludia chatbot and it's completely free. And you can put in your brief for your assignment, or you can put in some course materials, or you can put in a rubric or whatever. And you can say, help me make this more UDL.
Mm.
And because it's been trained on UDL, it gives you these fantastic kind of insights onto how you can, improve things from that. So that is one of the best tools that I've come across. I mean, CAST is the home of UDL. And if you're not aware of the CAST website, just type in CAST UDL, and Google will give you the website. And I mean, those are two of the very best resources. I mean, I wrote the book because I wanted to write a book that people who hadn't thought about how to use AI and UDL to help combat, if you like, accessibility issues in the classroom.
Mm.
So the book was designed, if you like, from, I wanted to give this to teachers who hadn't really thought about accessibility before,
Right.
and bring it up to date in terms of, right, well, you can use current AI tools. There's all this stuff on the marketplace, already. And here's some scenarios of different types of learners with different issues, from dyslexia and dysgraphia to cancer to blindness to deafness to whatever. Yeah. And how would you approach creating learning materials for these different types of learner? And so that's how the book's structured, basically,
Mm. So,
around different types of learner. So, yeah.
so Ludia sounds like a great tool for teachers to test and get some ideas and maybe learn how to do it for themselves.
Yeah,
Um, are
really.
there are there some other opportunities or strategies or platforms that teachers could use?
I think don't discount any of the just the regular chatbots. Whether you've got access to ChatGPT or Copilot or Perplexity or whatever it is you're using. I mean, what I normally do now when I create learning material is I'll kind of have a go, whether I do that by breaking the blank page syndrome by asking ChatGPT for a structure or whatever, and then I tweak it and add to it and all the rest of it. But when I've got something I think is getting somewhere, then I'll drop it into one of the chatbots and I will start asking it questions. I will say, okay, is this fully accessible for all learners? Yeah. How can I make give me 3 assessment strategies that would work for learners with different accessibility issues.
Mm.
And almost always it comes up with really good ideas. So
Mm.
it's really just a matter of gathering together a few kind of questions that you ask time and time again, just to make sure that you're covering all the bases. And the AI tools are very, very good at drawing on, a much wider set of literature than any one of us can really ever have read.
Mm.
And that's where I find the benefit from this stuff.
Are there any particular AI pedagogically driven platforms or productivity tools for teachers that you're finding teachers are getting value from, that you've seen teachers
Yeah,
use?
I mean, teachers is a broad scale. I mean, I'm mainly in the higher ed space because I teach at university. But I'm also with the newsletter and stuff, interacting with teachers all the way from kindergarten through to higher ed. I mean, Magic School is coming up a lot, as one of the AI platforms that seems to be getting a lot of traction. And when I'm talking to teachers and stuff, I keep hearing Magic School.
Right.
Uh, I've played around a little bit with Khan Migo,
Mhm.
Khan Academy. And I mean, the reason that I like that one is it's free, and it's that open approach to education, I think is really, really important. I think that there is going to be a digital divide, and AI is not free, and the better AI tools very often are behind a paywall and all the rest of it. So I think that the free tier access for educators needs to be made, free. And one of the reasons I like Notion is they give educators a free account. Canva does the same. Canva I use a lot. The AI tools in Canva, and the general tool set in Canva makes it very, very easy to create stuff, and generate material within the Canva space that looks great.
Mm.
And I mean, I've got a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they're both quite conversant in Canva now.
Right.
Um, and so it's an easy space for youngsters right through, to older learners to get a handle on as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, Canva would be a one to look at as well.
Great. Okay. And if you were to imagine if things go well with AI, schools adopting it,
They
putting
do.
safety guardrails in place, provide support for training, and maybe reduce some of those paywall barriers so that teachers can access more powerful, more effective AI platforms. What do you think the classroom will look like in 10 years' time?
I think teachers will more be coaches and facilitators than purveyors of knowledge. I think I think the role of a teacher as kind of the sage on stage, we
Mm.
know that that's an old model. We've known for a while that that's an old model. And yet, it's probably still in many, certainly higher institutions, higher education institutions, it's probably still the main way we work. We stand at the front of the class and all the students sit facing us, don't they, in tiered rows, and all the rest. I mean, the classrooms are still built around these 18th century principles. I mean, fortunately, in my college, we have some open rooms with movable tables and stuff. And I managed to snaffle one of those pretty much every term. I've said to them, I don't want to teach in a lecture theatre anymore. But I think we're going to move away from that. I think human teaching is going to be more focused on higher levels of personal interaction between us and the students. The knowledge acquisition, I mean, Google started it. AI is accelerating it. I mean, anybody can find the knowledge now and
Mm.
assemble very quickly. So what our job, I think, as teachers is going to be is to facilitate people then interpreting that knowledge in a way that moves them towards their goals outside of education. So we will become much more of a bridge between, if you like, the starting point and then linking what they're learning on whatever course it is with the outside world and helping them to interpret and to start developing the critical skills, of assembling the knowledge in a way that makes sense for where they want to go. And I mean, I've always loved the pastoral side of teaching. I on my LinkedIn profile, at the end of my little line of text, I describe myself as a people gardener. And I
Oh, I
mean,
love it.
that to me is what teaching is about.
Right.
It's helping people grow. It's,
Right.
seeing each individual in a classroom almost as a flower, and it's my job to water them and see them open and see them bloom. And I think AI is going to facilitate that. I think there's a lot of fear at the moment still in a lot of educators that they're going to be out of a job. They're not going to be out of a job, but the job is going to change.
Mm.
I think the job is going to change so that we are more this coach facilitator. And I mean, you've got a background in coaching and leadership development and all this kind of stuff. I mean, is that where you see it going as well?
I do. I do. I see that if it could go not as well as we want, we may find that schools are domains like if you imagine an animation studio where to get a job there, you need to know the platform and the platform that's being used or the software that's being used. That's the only way to get a job there. And it's very kind of proprietary and you need to know it to be able to do it. It's the tool you use. I imagine if it doesn't go that extreme, that it will be an environment where the AI tutoring chatbots and agents will be able to really help students accelerate um, their learning much faster. And so, this notion and idea of students having to spend 13 years in a classroom will be the past. And there'll be so much community and industry liaison that we may find 13-year-olds creating incredible solutions to global problems in health and environment, and leveraging technology to do that and building really novel solutions. I also agree with you 1,000% that teachers need to become more focused on the pastoral cultivation side, coaching side, facilitation side, while also being the leading learner in the classroom, where they have their own academic passions and interests, so they can model a passion for an area of learning, which could be mathematics, it could be an area of science, but they are an expert in something, and that core of that should be the ability to learn and share that learning with others. So I think it will look very, very different. I don't think the devices physically that we have today will be there. We're already seeing hand operated virtual devices that are holographic. So I think that the idea of how technology is manifested physically in classrooms will change completely as well. So I can really see, a classroom which is not a physical classroom anymore. It's a space of learning wherever that may be. So there's a few things in there that I think will be there.
I mean, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I mean, last year I managed to convince my university to move my part-time master's program fully online. And it took a while. We had to do a year of hybrid. And I said, okay, we'll do a year of hybrid, but I'm pretty sure that at the end of the year, like, we'll move fully online. And we did, because, nobody wanted to come in. I only got two or three bodies in the classroom from a cohort of like 20 for the whole year. So
Right.
everybody was dialing in. And I think that as the technology gets better, I mean, Zoom is just the start, isn't it?
Mhm.
When we've got lightweight kind of Oculus Rift visor type things that are as easy as these glasses to wear and
Mm.
stuff. It will become a democratized space to some extent, where we
Right.
don't have to sit in a drafty classroom and interact necessarily that way. There's benefits to that, but there's also a huge benefit to remote learning when it's done right.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's got a lot of potential. I'm quite excited about that. And I think that's what we've got to be as educators. We've got to be excited, haven't we? We've got to be
Absolutely.
interested in all these changes and how they're happening. And I mean, I say to my students, I say, I'm no expert, because there are no experts in AI at the moment. There's just people who know this much more than you do.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'm just one of those people, because I'm reading so much and I'm staying relatively on top of it, but nobody's on top of this stuff because it's changing so fast
Mm.
that we're all kind of just running to keep up, aren't we?
Mm.
Which is great because, from a learning perspective, it means that being in this space and trying to learn about this space means that we have got to constantly be learning
Mm.
and then sharing that with my students, the other educators that I'm encountering through podcasts and through sessions of education and whatever. I mean, it's just endlessly fascinating at the moment because we learn from each other.
Mm. So, Joe, with everything you're doing with your books and with your newsletter, your podcasting coming out as well, your new podcast, what's the best way for people to get hold of you if they want to pick up the conversation and get your advice and guidance?
The Gmail address down here and the LinkedIn address down there are probably the two easiest ways to get hold of me. Reach out. Yeah. Always glad to talk. I mean, your email came in yesterday?
Yes.
And now here we are talking. And I mean, we're half a world away from each other. It's just amazing how small the world has become.
Mm.
Uh,
Brilliant.
and I think I'm always open to collaborations and to trying new things. And yeah, if anybody's interested in getting in touch or having a chat, please reach out. I'd be only too happy to talk to anybody. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for your help. Cheers. Bye.